It's terrible that after 50 years it is behind closed doors. And I've no intention. Now I've started to stop now. I'm determined to put an end to this. Terrible.
Queen Camilla believed the private treasures inside Clarence House would remain tied to her life, her memories, and her position beside the king. Then, a sealed document was placed before her. The trustees had reached their final decision. Catherine, Princess of Wales, would inherit the Clarence House Private Collection. Camilla read the decisive paragraph twice, lowered the papers, and stared at the empty chair opposite her as the meaning became impossible to escape. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Camilla did not move. Her fingers tightened around the document until one corner folded beneath her grip. Clarence House had become more than a royal residence. It was where years of rejection had slowly turned into belonging. The private collection inside it a separate body of jewels, paintings, handwritten letters, ceremonial objects, and inherited family pieces outside the crown's official holdings carried the memory of that struggle. Losing control of its future felt like losing proof that she had secured a place within the institution. The trustees had spent months tracing provenance, the recorded history of who owned each object, while examining succession wishes, conservation duties, and the collection's place in the next reign. Their resolution was unanimous. Catherine had been formally named the future custodian, the person entrusted to preserve the collection intact and direct its use after the present reign. The decision did not simply grant access, it placed the entire long-term legacy beyond the Queen's authority. Camilla turned toward the aide waiting quietly by the door. "Does the king know?" she asked, her voice strained. The aide hesitated before confirming that Charles had already received a copy. That pause wounded her almost as deeply as the answer. He knew. He had known before she asked. Catherine received the same news at Kensington Palace. She read the resolution in silence, then placed it on the table without smiling. The inheritance carried beauty, but it also carried danger. She understood that every jewel and letter could be interpreted as evidence of victory over another woman. William watched her expression harden and heard her say this was not a gift anyone could accept lightly. The final page contained the sentence that changed everything. The collection must pass to the royal figure best positioned to protect its legacy across the next reign. Charles then requested an immediate private meeting with Camilla, and she understood that the trustees had acted with knowledge someone had deliberately kept from her. But before Camilla could challenge the decision, she had to face the three people whose futures had suddenly become entangled inside one devastating inheritance. The collection was valuable, but its true power could not be measured in diamonds, canvases, or royal provenance. For Camilla, it represented acceptance after decades of hostility. For Catherine, it became a responsibility she had never sought. For Charles, it was a test of loyalty between the woman beside him and the woman destined to stand at the heart of the next reign. Behind closed doors, none of them could pretend this was merely an administrative decision. Camilla walked slowly through the private collection room, feeling each object pull at a different memory. Clarence House had become her sanctuary after years of public anger, cruel headlines, and whispered judgment. Its private collection, a group of historically important objects owned and managed separately from the Crown's official treasures, had seemed to prove that she was no longer standing outside royal life. She stopped before a small portrait she had personally helped restore and stared at it for several seconds. Her private secretary waited until the Queen finally spoke. "They still see me as temporary," she said quietly. The words carried more pain than anger, because she had believed the house and everything within it represented permanence. Catherine sat with William at Kensington Palace, the London home used by their family and royal household, while the trustees' resolution lay unopened between them. The Princess of Wales, the title traditionally held by the woman married to the heir to the throne, understood why her household had been selected. She and the prince represented the bridge between the collection's past and its future public role. Yet responsibility did not feel like victory. She told him that accepting the inheritance could appear to be another woman's defeat, turning priceless objects into weapons in a struggle she had never wanted. William listened carefully before reminding her that refusing the role might place the collection's unity at risk. Still, Catherine feared that every future decision would be measured against Camilla's loss. Charles carried the heaviest secret. Weeks earlier, the king had received a confidential briefing naming Catherine as the trustees' preferred successor. He had delayed telling his wife because he hoped their recommendation might soften before the final vote. Instead, his silence now looked like betrayal. When he reopened the file, a handwritten memorandum slipped from between the formal pages. The note referred to an earlier promise that the collection would remain protected within the royal family's central line. Camilla believed those words secured her authority. The trustees had interpreted them as support for Catherine. The document contained one final reference, a request made during a private ceremony at Clarence House. Charles recognized the date immediately, and Camilla would soon discover that this single conversation had changed everything. To understand why the trustees chose Catherine, the story must return to the ceremony where one private request transformed concern into determination. Months before the trustees issued their ruling, the monarchy gathered for what appeared to be a graceful anniversary dinner at Clarence House. The speeches were measured, the smiles carefully controlled, and the collection's most treasured pieces had been opened for a private viewing. Yet before the final guests departed, Camilla drew the lead trustee into the library and made one extraordinary request. That conversation would later become the decisive moment everyone inside the palace remembered. Charles had spent the evening watching his family move carefully around one another. Catherine remained close to William, while the king repeatedly glanced toward his wife, sensing that she was waiting for the right moment to speak. The Clarence House Foundation Anniversary Dinner, a private event marking the preservation work connected to the royal residence, had brought senior household figures and collection trustees together under one roof. A historic diamond brooch, private royal letters, and delicate family miniatures had been displayed not as personal possessions, but as symbols of continuity meant to survive each generation intact. Camilla understood their meaning, yet she also felt the painful absence of her own children from that future. After dinner, the Queen Consort quietly asked Sir Jonathan Vail to join her in the library. The lead trustee followed, expecting a routine conversation about conservation. Instead, she asked him to amend the succession arrangement so selected pieces could pass directly to Tom Parker Bowles and Laura Lopes. A succession arrangement is the formal plan deciding who receives responsibility for property after its current holder. Her request would have moved historic objects outside the main royal line. Sir Jonathan set down his glass and told her that separating those pieces could fracture the collection permanently. Camilla's voice tightened. She insisted that Tom and Laura should not vanish from the story of her royal life simply because they had not been born into the crown. The trustee remained respectful, but he refused to offer reassurance. He warned that the request would require formal scrutiny. Catherine reached the library doorway during the final moments of the exchange. She heard Camilla say that her children deserved something lasting, then saw Sir Jonathan close the folder in front of him. Embarrassed by what she had witnessed, the princess withdrew before either noticed her. William immediately sensed her unease, but she told him only that she had entered at the wrong moment. The request triggered an emergency review of the collection's governing documents, the written rules controlling how its treasures must be protected. During that review, the trustees uncovered an older instruction stating that the collection should remain unified under the care of a future queen. Weeks later, Camilla learned through a documented household briefing that Catherine had stood near the library that night. Hurt turned into suspicion. She became convinced the future monarch had carried the conversation back to the trustees and helped shape their final decision. That suspicion followed Camilla into the room where restraint finally collapsed, and the two women confronted each other without ceremony, distance, or protection. Camilla did not summon Catherine to exchange courtesies. She waited inside the morning room at Clarence House, with the trustees' decision laid open on a table between two chairs. When Catherine entered, Camilla did not invite her to sit. She touched the document with one finger and asked the question that had been consuming her since the announcement. "Did you ask them for this?" Catherine's answer would either calm the palace or tear away its final restraint. Charles had arranged the meeting because he feared the dispute could split the family before it reached the public. The king believed one honest conversation might contain the damage, but his wife demanded complete privacy. No aides, secretaries, or advisors would be allowed inside. Catherine understood what that meant before the door closed. She had entered a room where titles offered no protection, and every word could deepen a wound already tied to identity, history, and succession, the formal process deciding who carries royal responsibility into the next reign. Catherine remained standing. She knew Camilla felt dispossessed, but she would not apologize for a decision she had neither requested nor controlled. The Queen accused her of lingering outside the library during the anniversary dinner, hearing a private appeal concerning Tom and Laura, then allowing trustees to use that vulnerable moment as proof that she could not protect the collection. Her voice grew sharper. She said silence could influence a decision as powerfully as an order. Catherine answered without looking away. She had never contacted the trustees, never discussed the library exchange with them, and never asked to inherit anything. Yet the princess refused to condemn their ruling simply to ease Camilla's anger. The collection's preservation plan, the binding arrangement, designed to keep its historic pieces together, existed to prevent personal pressure from breaking it apart. Calling the decision unjust would not change how it had been reached. Camilla pushed her chair backward. Its legs scraped across the floor as she declared that Catherine was inheriting objects connected to a life she had never lived and sacrifices she had never made. The future queen absorbed the accusation, then revealed through a documented letter she had sent privately to the trustees that she had asked permission to decline the inheritance. They refused. A designated custodian, they explained in their written reply, could not overturn the trust's long-term plan merely because accepting it had become emotionally painful. The door opened before Camilla could respond. Charles entered carrying the authorization file, his face heavy with regret. He admitted that his signature had allowed the trustees to complete their review without consulting his wife again. The Queen stared at him, realizing her fury had been directed at the wrong person. Camilla's anger had been aimed at Catherine, but Charles's admission exposed the deeper truth: the final power had never rested with either woman. The monarchy may revolve around crowns and titles, but the fate of the Clarence House collection rested inside a quieter structure of trusts, instructions, and signatures. Camilla could challenge the fairness of the outcome. Catherine could fear its consequences. Even Charles could regret the process, yet none of them could simply erase what had been decided. The trustees held an authority created precisely to prevent private emotion from dismantling a legacy built across generations. Charles returned to his study carrying the authorization file and Camilla's written demand that the transfer be suspended. He read her words twice, removed his glasses, and pressed his fingers against his eyes. A private preservation trust, the legal arrangement created to protect property for a stated purpose, governed every object in the collection. Its trustees had to consider historical continuity, physical security, and long-term public benefit before naming a future custodian. That structure mattered because it kept irreplaceable pieces from being divided whenever family loyalties shifted. The king had been permitted to initiate the review and authorize access to the records, but his influence ended once the trustees applied their succession criteria. Those criteria were the fixed standards used to decide who could preserve the collection across future reigns. He could not select Catherine personally, and he could not replace her simply because the outcome had wounded his wife. The decision had moved beyond preference. Camilla entered the study expecting him to support her demand. Charles placed the letter between them and said intervening now would destroy the trustees' independence. The Queen argued that rules created by people could be changed by people, especially when those rules treated her years of service as temporary. He understood her pain, but he warned that rewriting the process after an unwanted result would make the monarchy appear dishonest. Every future trust could then be challenged by whoever felt overlooked. Charles opened the oldest document in the file. The directive, signed decades earlier, required the collection to remain unified and eventually pass into the custody of the woman expected to serve as queen during the next generational transition. Unified custody meant that the treasures had to stay together under one responsible guardian rather than being scattered among relatives. That language had guided the trustees directly toward Catherine. Camilla still retained lifetime use of approved jewels and ceremonial pieces. She could wear them, display them, and participate in decisions concerning their care. But she could not sell them, divide them, redirect them to Tom or Laura, or permanently leave them to anyone else. Use was not ownership, and that distinction cut deeply. The acknowledgement document waited beside the file. Camilla lifted the pen, hesitated, then pushed it away. She refused to sign. Charles watched her leave, knowing the trustees would proceed without her cooperation, and Clarence House would begin changing immediately. Once Camilla withheld her signature, the ruling stopped being a private disappointment and became a visible transfer of control that no member of the household could ignore. The first consequence was not a public announcement or a dramatic removal van. It was a label. Inside the secure collection room, a registrar replaced an old inventory designation with a new custodial code bearing Catherine's household reference. Camilla entered moments later and saw the change before anyone could explain it. No treasure had moved, yet the room no longer felt like hers. In that small administrative alteration, the finality of the decision became brutally real. Camilla stared at the changed wording while the registrar held the unfinished inventory sheet against his chest. The first phase of the transfer had already begun. Every object would receive an updated record, a new photograph, a conservation assessment, and revised access permissions. Joint oversight meant that Clarence House and Kensington Palace would now share responsibility for security and care, but Catherine's household would hold the final custodial authority. The arrangement mattered because these records controlled who could handle, loan, restore, or relocate each object. A changed label was not decoration. It was power written in ink. The Queen asked the registrar to restore the previous designation until she had signed the acknowledgement document. He lowered his eyes and answered that the new code had already taken legal effect. Catherine would not immediately remove the jewels, paintings, letters, or miniatures. Most would remain inside Clarence House, protected in the rooms where they had long been kept. Yet legal custodianship, the recognized authority to safeguard and make decisions about the collection, had already passed beyond Camilla's control. The treasures could remain around her, while no longer belonging to her future. Camilla retreated to her private sitting room and called Annabelle. Her sister arrived to find her holding a brooch connected to the collection, one she had worn during some of the most important years of her royal life. The Queen removed it slowly and placed it on the table. She told Annabelle that wearing it now felt like borrowing something from Catherine. Her sister tried to remind her that lifetime access had been protected, but Camilla said access was not the same as belonging. Annabelle heard the humiliation beneath those words and stayed beside her as silence filled the room. Catherine responded with restraint. She instructed her team through a documented household order that no one was to enter Clarence House without Camilla's personal knowledge. The princess intended to preserve the older woman's dignity, yet the gesture only deepened the wound. Camilla interpreted the order as carefully managed pity. William then received an urgent conservation report. Several pieces were deteriorating, and delaying Catherine's authority could place irreplaceable objects at risk. Reversal was becoming impossible. The future king told her the transfer had to continue, but she answered by requesting one private meeting with Camilla without Charles, William, trustees, or courtiers. With the machinery of succession already moving, only a conversation stripped of titles and witnesses could prevent the inheritance from becoming a permanent personal wound. Catherine chose a small private room rather than a royal drawing room. There were no trustees waiting outside, no folders on the table, and no husbands present to control the temperature of the conversation. When Camilla arrived, Catherine remained standing. She did not offer an apology for becoming the collection's custodian. Instead, she offered Camilla something more difficult and more meaningful, a permanent place within the legacy she believed was being taken from her. Catherine had requested the meeting because she understood that legal victory without emotional reconciliation would poison both households. The collection could remain physically intact and still become a symbol of humiliation, resentment, and quiet revenge. She had studied every trust document and found areas where the custodian retained discretion, the freedom to make decisions within the legal rules over exhibitions, catalogs, historical interpretation, and future memorial acknowledgments. Those powers could not return ownership to Camilla, but they could decide whether her years of work would be remembered or slowly erased. Camilla listened without sitting. She told Catherine that she did not want ceremonial kindness offered after the real authority had already moved elsewhere. The Queen said a flattering title would not change the labels, the access codes, or the fact that another household now controlled objects she had protected for years. Her pain remained controlled, but every word carried the weight of someone refusing to be comforted by empty gestures. Catherine answered that this was not sympathy. She promised to preserve Camilla's curatorial contributions, the choices involved in selecting, restoring, and presenting historic objects inside every future catalog and exhibition. The princess would formally record the older woman's restoration work, personal acquisitions, and role in protecting the collection through difficult years. Camilla's history would not survive as a footnote. It would become part of the official account. Catherine then slid a handwritten proposal across the table. Camilla read the first page, stopped at the title, and looked up. "Did you write this yourself?" she asked. The future queen confirmed that she had. The proposal named Camilla Lifetime Honorary Guardian, a permanent position recognizing her stewardship while leaving legal custody unchanged. For the first time, the Queen's anger weakened. Catherine revealed through the written proposal that she would also create a distinct family archive for selected personal pieces linked to Tom and Laura. The archive would acknowledge their connection to their mother without breaking apart the historic collection. Camilla read that passage twice. It answered the fear that had driven her request at the anniversary dinner, that her children would disappear entirely from the story of her royal life. Camilla did not embrace Catherine. She picked up the pen, agreed to review the proposal, and prepared to stand beside the woman she had believed was erasing her. Their private compromise could soften the wound inside the palace. But beyond its walls, the inheritance had already become a national judgment on two queens and the monarchy's future. By sunrise, the private collection had become public property in everything but law. Broadcasters debated whether Catherine's inheritance represented continuity or humiliation. Commentators searched every photograph of Camilla for signs of defeat. Yet one moment captured the national mood more powerfully than any panel discussion. Outside Buckingham Palace, a newspaper vendor unfolded a front page carrying two portraits, one title, and a verdict that transformed a family dispute into a symbol of succession. Palace officials released a carefully written statement confirming that Catherine would become the collection's future custodian, while Camilla retained lifetime access and ceremonial use of designated pieces. A custodian is the person legally responsible for protecting, managing, and preserving historic property without treating it as ordinary personal possession. The explanation was meant to calm speculation, but every sentence carried political weight. One woman represented the collection's living history. The other represented the monarchy's approaching future. The media divided almost immediately. One group described the ruling as responsible preservation, arguing that the treasures needed a secure path into the next reign. Another presented it as a public demotion of the Queen, suggesting that authority had been removed from her while she still lived inside the house holding the collection. Camilla's pain became a national debate, and Catherine's responsibility was repeatedly framed as a victory she had never claimed. Outside Buckingham Palace, a vendor opened the morning edition of the London Herald. Photographs of Camilla and Catherine appeared beneath the headline, "The Collection Chooses the Future." A small crowd gathered near the railings. One elderly royal watcher said the Queen's restoration work should never be erased. A younger visitor answered that the princess had to prepare for the responsibilities awaiting her. Neither voice sounded cruel. Yet together they revealed the divide now running through public opinion. Camilla watched the coverage from Clarence House with the sound lowered. She tensed each time a presenter called Catherine the collection's rightful destination, as though her own years of care had merely delayed an inevitable transfer. The Queen turned away once, then returned to the screen, because refusing to watch would not change the verdict. Catherine understood that silence would make the wound deeper. At a conservation reception, a formal gathering supporting the repair and protection of historic objects, she publicly credited Camilla's years of stewardship, restoration choices, and personal commitment. The Queen stood beside her, listened, then deliberately gestured for the future monarch to approach the central display first. Catherine hesitated before accepting. That single gesture quieted the harshest speculation. It did not erase the injury, but it showed that Camilla would not publicly sabotage the future entrusted to Catherine. Now the palace could prepare its final declaration, defining exactly what each woman would represent. The public had witnessed rivalry, injury, and reluctant grace. Now the monarchy needed a final verdict that neither diminished Camilla nor weakened Catherine's inheritance. The final settlement did not restore Camilla's control, and it did not ask Catherine to surrender the responsibility entrusted to her. Instead, it defined the difference between possession and legacy. Catherine would inherit the Clarence House Private Collection intact. Camilla would remain its lifetime honorary guardian, permanently credited for the years she protected and expanded it. What began as a devastating rejection ended as a painful recognition that royal history could move forward without pretending its previous custodian had never mattered. The trustees formally confirmed the completed arrangement in a signed resolution. Catherine remained the undisputed inheritor and future custodian, meaning she would carry legal responsibility for protecting the collection into the next reign. Camilla retained lifetime use of approved jewels, ceremonial access to historic pieces, and a permanent role in decisions concerning their public presentation. The settlement mattered because it preserved the treasures as one collection while separating future authority from personal humiliation. Nothing would be scattered, and no contribution would be erased. The trustees also adopted Catherine's handwritten proposal in full. Every future catalogue would record Camilla's curatorial work, her personal acquisitions, the restorations she supported, and her part in preserving the history of Clarence House. That official recognition transformed memory into something permanent. The Queen would no longer control the collection's destination, but no future exhibition could present its story without acknowledging her place within it. Camilla signed the acknowledgement document in Charles's presence. She paused with the pen above the final page, then wrote her name and set it down without protest. The king watched silently, understanding that her signature was not surrender. It was restraint. He had not chosen Catherine over his wife, he had protected the independence of the trustees, while the future queen had used her new authority to protect the older woman's legacy. Catherine later thanked Camilla during a private conversation recorded in the official household account. The queen answered that the collection must never be divided simply to satisfy wounded pride. Her words closed the conflict more completely than any legal sentence could. At the first jointly curated exhibition, a display shaped by both women's choices, Camilla adjusted the position of a restored family miniature before stepping aside. Catherine then welcomed the guests, not as a conqueror replacing someone defeated, but as the next guardian accepting responsibility from the woman who had carried it before her. The inheritance marked Catherine's unmistakable arrival at the heart of the monarchy's next chapter. Yet Camilla's final act transformed devastation into dignity, ensuring her name would remain attached to the treasures she once feared losing. The Clarence House collection belonged to Catherine's future, carried Camilla's history, and emerged intact as proof that the crown survives not by avoiding painful change, but by giving that change meaning. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.